This video is going to be covering how to actually choose your informative speech topic. And a lot of times students will automatically go to Google, and I'm going to recommend that you don't do that and instead use what you already know and some tips that I'm going to give you to come up with a really good topic. Now, before we get into some things you want to think about, let me remind you about what we talked about in a previous video, which is the rhetorical canon and the rhetorical situation. So when thinking about your speech topic and starting to develop your speech, you're actually in the first step of the rhetorical canon, which is invention. As far as the rhetorical situation, this actually is of extreme importance when considering your topic. You have to understand what's your purpose here. So it's to inform. You're going to want to avoid topics that are controversial or persuasive. Your message is ultimately going to be your topic. And of course, it's very important that you consider both yourself as a speaker, what do you know, what are you interested in, and the audience as well. It can't just be about you. Your audience is very important to how you choose the topic. And I'm going to give you some guidance as to how to do that. So what I'm going to recommend is that you build on what you already know. The way in which you need to do that is very simple. Just open your eyes. If you do that, you'll find that there are a lot of good ways to get inspired by things around you. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're sleeping, which all of you do, so this will relate, and you have a really weird dream. That might inspire you to do a topic on what do different dreams mean. So you may end up with a topic of the meaning of dreams and 3 common symbols in dreams. Now notice here I limited it to 3 common symbols. This is another thing I'll be talking about. You really want to limit the way in which you set up your topic. You have 3 to 5 minutes for this speech, which is not a lot of time. Another example, so a couple of years back I was about to fly off to a conference, and this was right around the time when the Malaysian airline just disappeared. We couldn't find it, and we still can't, which freaks me out. So I kind of wanted to know, well, what technology do we have that really tracks planes and helps us to find them? So this could lead me to a speech topic of understanding current technology to track planes and investigate crashes. Here's another example from the news. This one's a bit more recent, the Ashley Madison scandal, which I find hilarious because so many people are getting involved in it. But instead of focusing on cheaters, let's focus on the way in which this scandal actually started, which was through hacking. And that's actually very, very common now that people are able to hack into private information. So maybe I could inform my audience, how do you protect your information online? So much of what we have is out there on the World Wide Web. What can we do to make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands? One last example, and this one's a bit more personal. My son loves the movie Frozen. He's obsessed with it. But I know that this movie actually comes from The Snow Queen, which is Hans Christian Andersen's book, and it has a much, much darker ending than the way it actually ends up for Elsa and Anna. So I kind of wonder, when Disney gets their hands on a fairy tale, what happens to it? So my speech topic could be how Disney adapts and changes famous children's tales. So these are only a few examples of things that you can use to inspire you. But basically what I want you to do is look around you. And once you do that, you can start to get an idea of a topic. Now, when you have an inspiration for a topic, you haven't yet fully achieved a speech topic. It's still considered under construction until it meets the few criteria that I'm going to bring up now. The first one is that it's new, and this might seem obvious, but again, this goes back to the rhetorical situation. You want to consider your audience. What do they already know and what do they not know? So for instance, I'll sometimes have students who are health fanatics and they'll want to do a speech on exercise or, vegetarianism or veganism. Those are things we already know about, right? What are you going to tell us about exercise or vegetarianism or veganism that we don't already know? So instead, what you can do is maybe think, well, what does my audience not know about exercise? So the scientific 7-minute workout, this is something that came out in research, the most efficient way to actually work out so that you only have to do it for 7 minutes, which is wonderful. Or maybe instead of vegetarianism, the paleo diet. And that's actually somewhat of an old example. There's now new research saying the paleo diet isn't really what we thought it is. But these are just examples of how you can take topics that aren't as new and really kind of make them fresh. So like I said, the 7-minute workout, the paleo diet. These are only some examples. Another thing to consider, the topic has to inform. So like I said about the rhetorical situation, to go back on it, your purpose here is to inform the audience. So again, you have to be careful about topics that could be controversial or persuasive. So let me go back to this example of the paleo diet. This could be an informative topic, though it also could be persuasive. You really need to make sure that you're addressing both the pros and cons, or just explaining what it is. What do we know about it? The moment you move into recommending this diet or saying that you should take on this diet, you're in persuasive territory, and that's not going to work. Some other things to avoid: abortion, the death penalty, or really anything that basically fits under this kind of umbrella of topics that people have opinions on. Avoid them. Save them for the persuasive speech. They are not going to work for this one. Another thing to consider, research. So sometimes students will go to, for instance, their hobbies. They'll look to, something that they know a lot about. And that's good. You definitely do want to bring in your own information in the speech topic. However, if you can't actually research it, because 3 sources will be required, you can't do the topic. It has to be researchable. There has to be information out there. Another thing it has to be narrowed. Like I mentioned again, you don't have a lot of time for this. 3 to 5 minutes might sound like a lot of time, but it's actually not. It's going to go very, very quickly. So it's important that you understand the difference between a subject and a topic. So a subject is just kind of a broad area of knowledge, right? Like yoga, for instance. If you came to me and said, hey, that's my speech topic, I'd say, no, it's not, because I have no idea what you're going to be talking about in relationship to yoga. What you need is a topic, which is a narrow subset that actually is going to focus on how it addresses the audience. So let me give you an example. I had a student who came to me. She was a nursing major, so she said, I want to talk about nursing. That, again, is huge. There's hundreds of things with nursing that you could talk about. So we needed to decide, A, how are we going to narrow this down, and B, how am I going to make this relevant for the audience? Because, again, going back to the rhetorical triangle, you have to think of them. So we came up with the topic of how the nursing shortage will negatively affect the medical field and patients. Notice we put patients in here so that the audience would in fact be connected to this topic. So that's what you need to really decide is, how can I take my subject area, which is probably what you're going to get when you're inspired by things around you, and really focus it into a topic. Topics that don't work. So these are some things to avoid. Like I said, hobbies, they're typically not researchable. Really big, broad topics. Social media is a huge one. Students will come to me, I want to talk about social media, or, dating in social media. That's huge. You have to narrow it down. Really, 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 really narrow it down. Be very specific. And things like adoption, or really anything that doesn't relate to a college-age audience, right? Most of them are not going to be considering adoption, or topics on, say, retirement. If it doesn't connect to your audience, again, going back to the rhetorical triangle, don't do it as a topic. Now, remember, your topic must be new, informative, researchable, narrowed, and it has to relate to the audience. If it doesn't fit into these categories, it won't work. So again, topics work best when you consider the rhetorical situation. So think about this. What does my audience know and what do they like? What do I know and what do I like? And of course the occasion, that it's a classroom speech, so of course keep it appropriate. I don't need any overtly sexual topics or anything like that. Once you sort of hit the nexus of those 3 things, that's where you get your best topics. So what you want to think about are topics that you can use, but I'm also going to recommend a few. Let's just say you're, drawing a blank. Here's some others that you can probably think. Now notice these are subjects, not topics. They haven't yet been narrowed. ISIS is obviously a popular one. 3D printers, Halloween, there's some really interesting history with that. Domestic violence, sexual assault, particularly for college-age students, that's something that's very relevant. Private prisons, there was an issue a couple years back with FAU that you may find out with the GEO group if you want to look that up. Civil forfeiture, that's also a really interesting topic. Knowing your rights when stopped, again, police brutality, as well as, of course, the racial overtones with that. That's been in the news. ALEC, that's another interesting one you might want to look up. Cyber hacking, I talked about that in an example topic. The top chemicals in foods. technology and education. All of these are recommended topics that you could try. But again, and I said topics, excuse me, it's subjects. These haven't yet been formed into topics. So that's what you would have to do. All right, so for homework, here are the things that I need you to do. Answer these questions, come up with 3 topics. It has to be 3. They need to be full sentences. They can't be an exact replication of what I've done. So if you just copy my stuff, I'm going to know it's my stuff, and I'm going to say that doesn't count. And it must fit within the specifications that I've listed. 2, would Alzheimer's be a good topic? Why or why not? And then 3, how does the rhetorical situation connect to the topic selection? And that is it. So come up with topics, answer the 2 additional questions, and know that the topics you come up with are going to be what I'm going to collect, and based on what you give me, I will pick a topic that I think is best for you. So if you're having any trouble with it, feel free to contact me, email me, chat with me, whatever, and I can give you some assistance if you need it.